All right, get ready, because our deep dive today is going to take us straight into ancient China, the spring and autumn period. To be exact, we're talking political intrigue and military strategy and a little bit more family drama than you'd think. But instead of, like smartphones and all that, it's with bronze swords and chariots.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And at the center of it all is this state of Zheng.
Okay.
Not a major power player like you'd think at first.
Right.
More like that underdog you wouldn't expect to root for. But they really shook the foundations of ancient China.
We've got a lot of good material to get into today.
Yeah.
Your research notes and some articles and even some chapters you flagged in that historical fiction book you mentioned is really fascinating stuff.
Absolutely.
So what's our main goal for today's deep dive into Zheng?
So our mission is to try and figure out how this state that seems totally insignificant can rise up and challenge the king himself. Zheng's story gives us a really unique view into how the Eastern Zhou dynasty worked, the power dynamics, all the chaos, all the excitement.
Two of my favorite things, chaos and excitement.
Yeah, definitely.
But before we get into Zheng's rise to power, maybe we could paint a picture of the world they were navigating, like what was going on at the time.
Okay.
I'll admit my ancient Chinese history is a little rusty.
All right, so picture this. The Western Zhou dynasty, once super powerful, it's now crumbling from the inside.
Okay.
King Yu, who's infamous for that whole beacon tower prank, talk about a miscalculation, accidentally helps the Quanrong tribe ransack the capital.
That's the best leadership moment.
No, not at all.
Like, I'm going to light these signal fires for fun.
Right.
While my allies think they're under attack.
Exactly.
It's not exactly the art of war.
Exactly. And this huge disaster kind of set off a chain reaction.
Okay.
King Ping, who is King Yu's son, managed to get a new eastern capital set up at Luoyang.
Okay.
This marks the start of the Eastern Zhou dynasty.
Okay.
But the damage was already done.
Okay.
The king was basically a figurehead.
Right.
And power shifted to the individual states.
Ah, so that's where this every man for himself chaos of the spring and autumn period comes in.
Exactly.
No strong central authority. Everyone wants power.
Yes.
Kind of like a game of Risk, but with real kingdoms as the prize.
A very good comparison. Alliances were constantly changing. Borders were shifting. Warfare was everywhere.
Wow.
It was a time of huge opportunity, but also incredible danger.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah.
So that's where Zheng, our underdog, enters the picture.
Precisely.
Okay.
But we got to remember that Zheng wasn't anything special at first.
Right.
Geographically, they were in a tough spot.
Okay.
They were constantly having to fight off attacks.
Right.
Not exactly a recipe for success.
Not a great start.
No.
What ended up saving them?
It was their founder, Duke Huan. Now, Duke Huan, he wasn't just some ambitious warlord.
Right.
He was actually the son of a deposed king, King Li of Zhou.
Hold on, are we talking royal bloodline here?
We are.
Did that give him, like, a claim to the throne?
Well, not quite.
Okay.
King Li's really harsh rule had caused a rebellion.
Okay.
And Duke Huan getting Zheng was kind of a consolation prize.
Right.
A way to keep him happy and out of the main political scene.
So instead of a crown, he got some land, and good luck with that.
Pretty much.
But obviously, Duke Huan wasn't going to settle for just a consolation prize.
No.
What was his big plan to turn Zheng into a real contender?
So Duke Huan understood that location was everything.
Right.
Instead of struggling out on the fringes,
he
set his sights on something much more valuable, the fertile plains of the Central Plains around modern-day Hainan.
Prime real estate, even back then.
Oh, absolutely.
But I'm guessing that area was already taken.
It was. 2 minor states controlled it.
Okay.
But Duke Huan was a strategist.
Always thinking.
He started moving Zheng's people and resources, slowly but surely taking power away from his rivals.
A real long game.
It was.
Did he live to see his vision come to life?
Sadly, no.
Oh, no.
It's kind of ironic, actually.
How so?
It was the Quanrong, the same tribe that caused the dynasty to decline in the first place.
Oh, wow.
Who cut his reign short.
No way.
Duke Huan died defending the king in a battle against them.
Wow. Talk about a twist of fate.
It really is.
The very force he was trying to outmaneuver ended up being his downfall.
It really is incredible, isn't it?
That's rough.
It is, but his legacy lived on through his descendants.
Okay.
The most famous one being his grandson, Duke Zhuang.
Okay.
Duke Zhuang inherited a more secure Zheng, one that was prosperous and ready for its time to shine.
And that's where things get really interesting.
Oh, absolutely. Duke Zhuang, yeah, he's one of those figures history remembers for both his cunning and his ruthlessness.
Right.
His path to power was anything but straightforward, though.
You mentioned his story takes some interesting turns. What makes Duke Zhuang stand out, even in a period as wild as the spring and autumn period?
Well, even his birth is steeped in symbolism, you see.
Okay.
His mother had a really, really difficult labor.
Right.
So difficult that she gave him a name that reflected her hardship. Wuxing, meaning born with difficulty.
Wow. Talk about starting life with a metaphorical weight on your shoulders. That's kind of a lot to put on a kid, even if it's a different time.
It's really interesting, though, when you think about it in the context of ancient Chinese culture.
Okay.
Names weren't just labels. They carried weight, often reflecting personality traits, circumstances, or even, like in Duke Zhuang's case, a mother's resentment.
So names had a deeper meaning, almost a prediction of a person's path. It makes you think about how even today, we still attach significance to names.
Absolutely. And those deeper meanings, they give us as historians these really valuable insights into what the culture was like back then.
Right. Okay, back to Duke Zhuang. He eventually ditches the Wuxing nickname, right?
He does.
I can't imagine it did him any favors on the battlefield or anything.
He ends up taking the name Zhuang, implying solemnity and strength. It's quite the branding change.
Yeah, definitely a PR win in the halls of power.
For sure.
It sounds like those early struggles weren't limited to just an unfortunate name, though. Didn't you mention something about some intense family dynamics?
That might be an understatement.
Okay.
His mother openly favored his younger brother, Gongshu Duan, showered him with affection.
Wow.
And even encouraged him to try and usurp the throne.
It's like straight out of HBO's Succession, but, ancient China edition.
Exactly.
So did Duke Zhuang just take this lying down?
No, not a chance.
Okay.
He might have played along at first, but that was a calculated move.
Okay.
He understood that patience and strategy, those were his allies in this situation.
Okay.
He waited, let his brother and mother get overconfident.
Oh, I see where you're going with this.
Let their ambition lead them right into his trap.
So what did he do?
He waited for the right moment.
Okay.
And then he struck swiftly and decisively. Defeating Gongshu Duan at the Battle of Zheng defeats Duan at Yan.
Wow.
He even went so far as to imprison his own mother.
Wow. Talk about a power move. To take on your own family like that demonstrates some serious ambition.
It does.
But where's the solemn and strong Duke Zhuang in all of this? This just seems straight up ruthless.
It's a really good example of the tough situations leaders had to deal with back then.
Okay.
Even though he took these actions, Duke Zhuang was still bound by filial piety.
Right, that deep respect for parents.
Exactly.
So he's balancing ambition with these societal expectations. What a tightrope walk.
Exactly. And there's this really poignant story that shows this internal struggle.
Okay.
It's called Meeting Mother in the Yellow Springs.
Meeting Mother in the Yellow Springs.
Yeah, so after imprisoning his mother, Duke Zhuang vowed to never see her again.
Oh, wow.
Unless it was in the underworld. So what did he do?
I don't know. Did they have Skype in ancient China?
He had his men dig a tunnel symbolizing the underworld.
Right.
And that's where he met his mother.
Oh, wow. So he
kept his oath without actually breaking his vow.
That's a real symbolic gesture.
It is.
It highlights this dance between political maneuvering and personal principles that leaders often have to navigate.
Exactly. Duke Zhuang's story is a prime example of how your personal life can really shape you as a leader.
Right.
These weren't just family fights. These were experiences that changed how he approached power on a much larger scale.
Right. His actions must have sent shockwaves through the courts of China.
Definitely.
Here's this leader willing to solidify his power, even if it meant going against his own family.
Right.
How did this affect Zheng's standing in the region?
Duke Zhuang's ruthlessness, whether it was calculated or out of necessity, sent a very clear message. Zheng was not to be messed with.
Right.
He'd secured his power, and now he was ready to test it out on a much larger stage.
So Duke Zhuang's got his power base. He's taking care of those family issues.
Right.
He's ready for the big leagues now.
Right.
But how do you go from, like, minor state ruler to major player in this game of ancient Chinese politics?
Well, Duke Zhuang, he was a master strategist, both on and off the battlefield.
Right.
He knew that military might by itself wasn't going to be enough.
Okay.
He needed to make alliances, play the political game, and really seize any opportunity that came up.
So not just brute force.
Exactly.
Where did he turn his attention first in this big strategy game?
He went after two of the most important states at the time, Qi and Lu.
Okay.
He created alliances that would give Zheng the protection and the influence it needed.
Right.
These weren't just, agreements on a piece of paper. They showed that he really understood the power dynamics at play.
Right, like he was always thinking a few steps ahead.
Exactly.
What did he do with this newfound power?
He set his sights on some neighboring states, Zhou and Song.
Okay.
They weren't major powers or anything, but taking them over did two things for him.
Okay.
First, it gave Zheng more resources.
Right.
And maybe even more importantly, it sent a message to the rest of China. Zheng was a force to be reckoned with.
Every victory, even against smaller states, it was all part of his plan.
Exactly.
I can't imagine King Ping was too happy about this up-and-comer stealing his thunder.
King Ping was not pleased at all.
Yeah.
He saw Duke Zhuang's growing power as a direct threat to the Zhou dynasty, which was already on shaky ground.
So how did Duke Zhuang deal with this pushback from the top? You can't just ignore a king, right?
No, you can't.
Wow.
Duke Zhuang had to be careful.
Okay.
Defying the king openly, that would have been a disaster.
Right.
But backing down, well, that would have ruined everything he'd worked for.
Right.
So he chose to use some, let's say, political maneuvering.
Okay, I'm intrigued. What did he do?
He offered his own son as a hostage to King Ping's court.
Okay.
It was a gesture of, appeasement, loyalty.
Okay.
But, and here's the thing, he countered by asking for one of King Ping's sons to be sent to Zheng in return.
Okay.
To foster goodwill and all that.
That's not appeasement. That's a power move.
Right.
It's like he's saying we're equals now.
Exactly.
Was King Ping blind to this?
King Ping got the message, but he was in a tough spot himself.
Okay.
His authority was fading.
Right.
And flat out refusing Duke Zhuang, well, that started a war he couldn't win.
Right.
They were at a standstill, for the moment anyway.
But this power struggle obviously didn't end there. What happened next?
Eventually, King Ping passed away, and his grandson, King Huan, he inherited the throne.
Okay.
And of course, that tension with Zheng.
Right.
But King Huan, he wasn't like his grandfather.
How so?
King Huan, he had something to prove.
Okay.
He wanted to show everyone that the Zhou dynasty was still in charge.
Right.
So basically, the stage was set for a showdown.
And was it a good one?
Oh, it was epic.
Okay.
It all started with something that seemed pretty minor. Stolen grain.
Stolen grain. That doesn't sound very epic.
It was a calculated move, you see.
Okay.
Duke Zhuang needed a reason to fight King Huan.
Right.
And he needed it to be on his terms. So what does he do?
What?
He has his troops harvest the king's own wheat fields.
Wow.
A direct challenge to King Huan's power.
And it worked.
Oh, it worked perfectly.
Wow. Next level strategic thinking.
Oh, yeah.
So did King Huan storm in, pitchfork in hand, ready to defend his wheat fields?
King Huan, he was furious, maybe a little naive.
Okay.
He took the bait.
Okay.
He gathered his armies, called on his allies, many of whom were only there because they had to be.
Right.
And marched right into Zheng territory.
This is it.
Right.
The Clash of the Titans. Was it a fair fight?
On paper, King Huan had the advantage.
Okay.
He had a bigger army.
Right.
He was the king.
Yeah.
And he had those, shall we say, unenthusiastic allies.
Right.
But Duke Zhuang understood something.
What's that?
Real strength. It doesn't come from just having more soldiers. It comes from having a good strategy and knowing your enemy's weaknesses.
So what was Duke Zhuang's strategy? How do you go up against what seems like a superior force?
He played the long game.
Oh.
In the first few battles, Duke Zhuang's troops, they would strategically retreat,
Okay.
drawing King Huan's forces deeper into Zheng's territory.
Oh, the old lure and ambush.
Exactly.
Did King Huan fall for it?
Hook, line, and sinker.
Oh.
He thought Zheng's retreat meant they were weak.
Right?
He got overconfident, and, this is important, his army got spread too thin.
Okay.
Duke Zhuang saw his chance.
Yeah.
He knew things were shifting in his favor, and he launched a counterattack.
How'd it go?
It was a massacre.
Wow.
King Huan's army was routed.
Wow.
They weren't really united.
Right.
And King Huan, well, he wasn't really a military leader.
Right.
Duke Zhuang used all of that to his advantage.
Wow. What about King Huan? What happened to him?
He got away,
Okay.
but not without a little parting gift from Duke Zhuang's forces. As he was retreating, they shot him in the shoulder with an arrow.
Oh, wow.
Not enough to kill him, but definitely enough to wound his pride.
Yeah, I bet. Talk about adding insult to injury. A defeated king retreating with an arrow in his shoulder. That's a pretty powerful image.
It really is.
It symbolizes Zheng's rise.
Definitely.
But he'd won this huge victory. Why not go all the way? Why not go for the throne?
Duke Zhuang was ambitious.
Right.
But he was also a pragmatist.
Okay.
He knew that trying to take the throne, that would just unite his enemies against him.
Right.
It could have ruined everything he'd worked so hard for.
Sometimes knowing when to hold back is as important as knowing when to strike.
Exactly.
Okay.
Duke Zhuang knew that true power wasn't just about being king.
Right.
He wanted Zheng to be the most important force in the region.
Right.
And this win over King Huan, that solidified his position as the most powerful leader of his time.
What a story.
It really is.
From seeming insignificant to going up against the dynasty itself.
Yeah.
That's Duke Zhuang for you.
He was a remarkable leader.
So what was his lasting impact on Chinese history?
Duke Zhuang's legacy is a complicated one.
Okay.
He showed that if you're smart enough and you understand how to use both military and political power, you can disrupt the status quo.
Right.
But even more than that, he changed the game.
How so?
He ushered in a new era where powerful regional leaders, what we call hegemons, would dominate Chinese history.
Right. That takes us right into the Warring States period, but that's a deep dive for another day.
Exactly.
As we wrap up our deep dive into Zheng and Duke Zhuang,
right.
What's the key takeaway here? What's that one nugget of wisdom you want our listeners to take away from this story?
Duke Zhuang's story reminds us that leadership, it's not simple.
No.
You need to understand the dynamics of power.
Right.
You need to think strategically on multiple levels.
Right.
And you need the wisdom to know when to push the boundaries and when to show restraint.
I like it.
It's about planning for the long term.
Right.
Adapting to change.
Right.
And sometimes it's even about knowing how to use a little stolen grain to your advantage.
Food for thought. Literally.
Yeah.
Well, Duke Zhuang's story reminds us that history's most fascinating figures, they don't always fit neatly into those good guy, bad guy boxes.
That's true.
They were dealing with complicated moral dilemmas, political challenges.
Right.
And they often did it with a mix of intelligence, boldness, and let's face it, maybe even a little ruthlessness.
It was a different time.
That's true. Well, until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and never underestimate the power of a good deep dive.